They say the quietest neighborhoods hide the loudest secrets. Ours looked like a postcard, perfectly trimmed lawns, pastel houses lined up like obedient children, and wind chimes that sang with every breeze. It was the kind of place people moved to when they were ready to settle down, raise kids, maybe adopt a golden retriever, and pretend the world wasn't on fire. For me, it was supposed to be a fresh start. After years of city chaos, I wanted peace, community, and most of all, a safe place for my dog, Charlie. Charlie was more than a pet. He was my anchor, loyal, quiet, the kind of dog who'd rather nap in the sun than chase a squirrel. He had these big brown eyes that melted strangers on the street, and a habit of tilting his head at everything, like he was trying to understand it all. I rescued him 2 years ago from a crumbling shelter, and in many ways he rescued me right back. When we moved in, people seemed welcoming enough. A few polite hellos, casserole offerings from across the street, even a neighborhood newsletter dropped into my mailbox. The Homeowners Association, or HOA as everyone called it, had rules. Lots of them. Lawn height limits, mailbox paint codes, noise policies that read more like legal contracts. But I figured, if you played by the book, they left you alone. I didn't mind the structure. Honestly, it was comforting at first. After the unpredictability of apartment life, the order was almost soothing. That was until I noticed her. Standing at the corner of her porch like a sentinel, sunglasses on even when the sky was grey. She watched everything. Every delivery, every jogger, every trash can not rolled in by 10 a.m. And when I say she watched, I mean with the sharpness of someone who wasn't just observant, but suspicious. At first I brushed it off. Maybe she was just lonely, or bored, or both. I even nodded once as Charlie and I passed her gate. She didn't nod back. Something told me then. This wasn't going to be the peaceful life I had hoped for. I just didn't know how far one neighbor's obsession could go, or that she'd come for the one thing I loved most in the world. The first time Karen spoke to me, it wasn't really a conversation. It was a warning disguised as a smile. I had just finished a morning walk with Charlie, his leash slack in my hand as he trotted beside me, calm as ever. As we passed her driveway, she stepped out of her garden like she'd been waiting. Her lips curled in something that could have passed for neighborly, if not for the sharp glint behind her sunglasses. "Some of us like to sleep in on weekends," she said, her tone wrapped in fake sweetness. I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard her. "Your dog has quite the bark on him." I wanted to correct her. Charlie rarely barked, only when he sensed someone at the door or heard something truly unusual. But I smiled politely, muttered an apology, and kept walking. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she had mistaken someone else's dog for mine. I wanted to believe that. But that was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing her more and more. She was always there, watering a lawn that didn't need watering, rearranging flower pots that looked the same every day, adjusting her already perfect flagpole, watching, always watching. Then came the second comment. Charlie and I were returning from the park, and as I unclipped his leash by our porch, Karen called out from across the street, "You know, HOA rules state pets must be leashed at all times outside, even on your property." It wasn't true. I'd read the handbook 3 times. But her voice didn't invite discussion. It was declarative, final, the kind of tone people use when they expect compliance without question. Again, I nodded and went inside. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wondered if she acted this way with everyone, or if we'd been singled out. A week later, I got my answer. During an evening walk, Charlie paused on the edge of her lawn, didn't step on it, just sniffed. Karen practically exploded out of her front door, waving her arms like he'd committed a felony. "Get that thing away from my property," she barked. Dogs like that shouldn't be in family neighborhoods. Dogs like that, I echoed, stunned. She didn't clarify, just turned and slammed her door. And that's when I realized we weren't dealing with a neighbor. We were dealing with a problem. It came in a crisp white envelope, the HOA logo embossed in the top corner like a seal of judgment. I found it wedged in my mailbox one Thursday morning, sandwiched between a coupon flyer and a utility bill. I opened it without thinking, expecting another friendly reminder about lawn care or recycling rules. Instead, I found a formal complaint, my first ever. Violation, repeated disturbance of neighborhood peace, excessive dog barking. The words hit harder than I expected. Charlie, disturbing the peace. I read it twice, then a third time, searching for some mistake, a misfiled report meant for someone else. But my address was there, my name, even the time frames they claimed the barking had occurred. Mid-morning, late afternoon, early evening. 3 separate incidents. Each one, I remembered, was completely unremarkable. Charlie had been napping inside, chewing his toy, or curled by my desk. Not a bark, not a howl. I called the HOA number listed at the bottom of the page, hoping for clarity. The woman who answered sounded tired, like she had fielded one too many complaints that morning. I explained the situation calmly, told her my dog was quiet, well-trained, even showed her proof from my home security camera. But she was unmoved. "We've received multiple complaints," she said, almost robotically. "It's not personal. It's just procedure." "Anonymous complaints?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yes," she finally admitted. "We are obligated to act on them if they're repeated." And just like that, I knew. Karen. There wasn't another neighbor who had an issue. Everyone else waved, smiled at Charlie, even asked to pet him. But Karen had made it clear from day one. She didn't want him near her, didn't want us in her view, didn't even want the illusion of canine happiness within sniffing distance of her precious garden gnomes. I hung up the phone, my chest tight. It wasn't just a warning. This was a strike. Too many more and we'd be subject to fines. Or worse, forced restrictions. All because someone with too much time and too little kindness had decided to wield the HOA like a weapon. Charlie lay at my feet, looking up with those trusting eyes. He had no idea what storm was beginning to form around him. But I did. And I wasn't going to let it touch him. I didn't want a war. I just wanted to live quietly, take my dog on walks, and sip my coffee without feeling like I was under surveillance. So I tried to play along. I adjusted Charlie's walk schedule, taking him out early in the morning and late at night when fewer neighbors were around. I even bought one of those no-bark training collars. Not the shock kind, just one that beeped softly as a deterrent. Not that Charlie needed it. He barely barked at all. But I wanted every inch of proof that I was doing my part. I installed a camera by the front door, angled just right to show our porch and the sidewalk. It felt paranoid at first, like I was the one becoming obsessed. But after that first complaint, I knew I couldn't take chances. Karen was watching, and I needed to watch back. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. I started to think maybe my efforts had worked. Maybe she'd gotten bored. Maybe she'd moved on to someone else's flower bed. But then another notice showed up. Failure to pick up pet waste, violation 2. This time I laughed. A bitter, tired laugh that came from disbelief. Charlie never pooped in front of her house. Never. I carried those ridiculous neon green waste bags like a badge of honor. I'd sooner forget my keys than forget to clean up after him. But there it was again. Her signature smear campaign, using rules as bullets. When I called the HOA again, the same woman answered. She didn't say it outright, but I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. I offered to show footage. She hesitated but declined, citing process and privacy. What privacy? Karen was out here filing fake reports and still hiding behind the word anonymous. Then came the accusation that nearly broke me. Dog behaved aggressively toward homeowner. According to the report, Charlie had lunged at Karen during a walk. My Charlie, the same dog who flinched at vacuum cleaners and leaned against toddlers for affection. I could see what was happening. She was building a case. Strike by strike, she was laying the groundwork to get Charlie labeled a threat. And if that happened, I didn't even want to imagine what the HOA could do. I stood by the window that night, watching the streetlights glow. Charlie slept peacefully by the couch. But I couldn't, because for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was personal. It was a scorching afternoon when it happened, the kind of day where even the breeze feels like a hairdryer and the sidewalks radiate heat through your shoes. I was pulling into my driveway, Charlie panting softly in the passenger seat, when I heard it. A sharp, pitiful whimper. It wasn't Charlie. It wasn't a passing dog. It was coming from Karen's backyard. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe she was dog sitting. Maybe someone had brought a pet over. But the sound came again. Louder this time. Desperate. Broken. Charlie perked up, ears high, nose twitching toward the direction of the noise. I stood at the edge of my property, pretending to inspect my garden hose, and stole a glance through the narrow gap between her fence panels. That's when I saw it. A dog, thin, matted, trembling, chained to a metal post in the corner of her yard. No shelter, no shade. A metal bowl overturned nearby. Its tongue hung out, and its ribs pressed against its sides like they were trying to escape. My stomach turned. That wasn't just neglect. That was cruelty. I pulled out my phone and started recording. At first it was just footage of the poor dog pacing in tight circles, yanking at the short chain, unable to lie down comfortably. Then Karen came out. I froze, instinctively lowering my phone just enough to stay hidden. She had a broom in one hand, a glass of iced tea in the other. The way she waved the broom, casual, irritated, like swatting away a nuisance, made my chest tighten. Then I saw her kick over the already empty water bowl. "Stop whining," she snapped. "You got yourself into this mess. Not my fault you're stupid." I caught it all. Every word, every movement. Suddenly everything made sense. The hostility, the need to project blame, the anonymous complaints. She had her own secrets, ones far worse than a quiet dog taking a morning walk. While she was fabricating stories about Charlie, she was hiding something much darker behind her fence. I stepped back, heart pounding. This wasn't about neighborhood squabbles anymore. This was about saving a life. And for the first time since Karen declared war on my dog, I smiled. Because now, I had the truth. The moment I closed my front door, I knew what I had to do. No more hoping it would blow over. No more trying to reason with a woman who had none. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about a defenseless animal suffering in silence, just a few feet beyond that pristine white fence. And I wasn't going to stand by. I pulled the footage from my phone onto my computer and backed it up in 3 different places. I slowed it down, enhanced the audio, made sure every cruel word she spoke could be heard clearly. Then I positioned one of my exterior cameras just right to catch a view of her backyard through a narrow gap between the slats. It was grainy, imperfect, but enough to see the dog's condition worsening, still chained, still pacing, still ignored. Each day I checked the footage. Each day it got harder to watch. I started asking around, carefully, casually. During a chat with my neighbor 2 doors down, I mentioned seeing a dog behind Karen's house. Her eyes widened, and she lowered her voice. She had another one last year, just as skinny. Then one day it was gone. Another neighbor, an older man who walked his pug every morning. Said he'd heard crying from that yard before but didn't want to get involved. Karen scares people, he said with a sigh. She finds ways to make your life miserable. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. I created a folder. I named it Evidence Animal Neglect. Inside, I placed every video, every screenshot, even clips from the HOA security camera across the street, which captured her yelling during one of her tantrums. I documented dates and times, printed statements from the neighbors who were willing to talk, some anonymously, some brave enough to sign their names. Finally, I contacted Animal Control. I didn't just call, I showed up in person, evidence in hand, face calm, but voice shaking. I handed them the USB drive and folder like it was a weapon, because that's exactly what it was. The woman at the counter raised an eyebrow as she clicked through the files. By the time she got to the footage of Karen kicking the bowl, she looked up and said, "We'll take it from here." And just like that, the balance began to shift. 2 days later, the van showed up. It was white, unmarked except for the small county seal on the door and the words Animal Welfare Services in plain block letters. I stood inside, behind the blinds, my heart pounding as I watched 2 officers step out, one with a clipboard, the other with a body camera strapped to his chest. They walked up Karen's front steps and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open, and there she was, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes scanning the street like a hawk spotting prey. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the shift in her expression when they asked to see the animal. She laughed, shrugged, probably claimed it wasn't hers, but they insisted. One of them pointed toward the side gate. She resisted, gesturing, throwing her arms up, but eventually turned and stormed toward the backyard. I held my breath. Minutes passed before the officers reappeared, this time with the dog. It looked even worse than before. Limping slightly, head down, ribs pressing through its sides. One of them carried it gently, whispering something as he wrapped a blanket around its shivering body. Karen followed, her face red, her voice rising in anger as she pointed and shouted. The body cam officer stayed calm, scribbling something onto his clipboard. Then the other officer showed her a form, legal, binding, official. Her voice cracked. She tried pleading. I watched her face shift from fury to desperation in a single breath. But it was too late. The van doors closed with a hollow thud, and the vehicle pulled away. Karen stood in the street, arms dangling, mouth slightly open, as if she still didn't understand how it had all unraveled. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the neighborhood. Her gaze paused at my house. Our eyes met for a split second. She knew. The next morning, I received a letter from Animal Welfare Services, thanking me for my report and confirming that the dog had been taken into emergency veterinary care. The words were clinical, but the meaning was everything. The dog was safe. Karen. She wasn't seen for a while after that, but the silence she'd demanded from everyone else had finally wrapped around her. And this time it wasn't peaceful. It was justice. It didn't take long for word to spread. In neighborhoods like ours, gossip travels faster than delivery trucks. And when it's about someone like Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of order, people pay attention. The sight of the animal control van parked outside her house had stirred something. Whispers turned into phone calls, and phone calls turned into full-blown HOA discussions. Suddenly, the woman who once walked the neighborhood like she owned it was nowhere to be seen. At the next HOA meeting, the usual small talk gave way to silence when her name came up. A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others looked downright embarrassed. She had been loud about rules, loud about violations, but quiet, conveniently quiet, about what was happening behind her own fence. Her previous complaints, once treated like gospel, were now being revisited with suspicion. An official letter followed soon after. Karen had been removed from the HOA's Community Oversight Committee, the position she held unofficially, but wielded like a throne. Her pending complaints against other neighbours, including mine, were suspended and marked for review. I got a personal email from one of the board members. Short, but meaningful. "We're sorry. We should have looked deeper." Neighbours who used to nod stiffly now waved. A few even knocked on my door with kind words or small offerings. Cookies, dog treats, a bottle of wine. One woman, the same neighbour who once said Karen scared her, admitted she felt relieved. "It's like the neighbourhood took a breath," she said. And she was right. The whole place felt different. Karen's house became a ghost on the street. No more porch patrols, no more lectures about garbage bins or barking that never happened. Her flower beds wilted. Her perfect lawn grew uneven patches. She stopped responding to the HOA, and soon after, a for sale sign appeared crookedly in her yard, like even the post didn't want to stand for her anymore. Charlie, oblivious to the drama, continued living his best life, sunbathing on the porch, trotting happily down the sidewalk, now free from the invisible leash of anxiety that had tethered us for months. The woman who tried to weaponize the rules had been undone by her own, and in the end, the community she once tried to control finally saw her for who she really was, not a protector, but a bully. And no one mourned her fall. The quiet finally returned, but this time it felt real. Not the tense artificial stillness that comes when someone's watching your every move, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind you don't notice until you realize the knot in your stomach is gone. Charlie and I resumed our morning walks without second-guessing which path to take or who might be lurking behind a curtain. He sniffed freely, tail wagging, occasionally stopping to bask in the attention of a neighbour who used to avoid eye contact, but now bent down with a smile and a gentle pat. The house next door stayed silent for a while. Karen's blinds stayed shut, and the once perfectly arranged porch slowly fell into disarray. Wind-blown leaves on the steps, an overturned planter, a crack forming in the concrete. The for sale sign swayed slightly in the breeze like it was waiting for a better story to take root. And eventually it did. A young couple moved in, fresh-faced and hopeful, waving eagerly as they unpacked boxes and hung wind chimes that chimed softly instead of accusingly. The HOA, perhaps chastened by their blind allegiance to anonymous complaints, began making changes too. They updated their policies, adding clearer requirements for evidence and offering residents the right to respond before fines were issued. It felt like the whole community had learned something, like maybe, for once, the system had bent in the right direction. One afternoon I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea. Charlie sprawled at my feet. The breeze was warm. The sun painted gold across the rooftops, and laughter drifted in from a few houses down. Kids played, dogs barked. Real barks this time, joyful, harmless. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch. Charlie looked up at me with his lazy eyes, his tail giving a slow thump. I leaned down and scratched behind his ears, whispering, "We made it, buddy." He didn't understand the words, but he understood the calm, the peace, the safety. And I understood something too. Peace isn't always about silence. Sometimes it's about knowing you stood up, did the right thing, and made room for something better to grow in its place. This time, the quiet wasn't Karen's doing. It was ours. I used to believe that if you kept your head down and followed the rules, you'd be left alone. That if you were kind, respectful, and didn't stir trouble, the world would return the favor. But life in this neighborhood taught me otherwise. Sometimes it's not enough to be quiet or to play nice. Sometimes you have to stand up, not because you want to fight, but because someone needs to. Karen thought she could twist the system to her will, that she could weaponize structure and routine to control people, and silence the things that didn't fit her vision of perfect. She came after my dog, the most innocent soul in my life, thinking I'd fold. But she never expected to be seen. She never expected that while she was keeping tabs on everyone else, someone might finally turn the lens back on her. I didn't report her out of spite. I did it because that dog, the one she left to suffer, didn't have a voice. I did it because Charlie almost lost his home, his freedom, all because of a lie. And I did it because sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to expose the things that threaten it. I've learned that justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and grand speeches. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of a camera lens, a signed report, or the click of a closing gate on an animal control van. It comes in the courage to say, enough, even when your voice shakes, especially when it does. Karen may be gone now, but her legacy serves as a reminder. Bullies don't always wear leather jackets or stand on playgrounds. Sometimes they water their roses at dawn and write anonymous letters in cursive. But no matter how they present themselves, they can't escape accountability forever. To anyone who's ever been targeted by someone like her, someone petty, bitter, and relentless, know this: you're not powerless. You're not alone. And you don't have to let their noise drown out your peace. She tried to make me fear the rules. Instead, I used the rules to end her reign. She reported my dog, but in the end, I reported the truth, and it worked.